Hi everyone, my name's Jen and I'm here to talk virtually with you about how I use artificial intelligence in my psychology and cognitive neuroscience research. But first, how did I get here? So as I said, my name's Jen and I got my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's in science in psychology from the University of Alberta in 2021. And during my 5 years of my undergrad, I did a lot of research that was interesting, and part of it used AI that I'll talk about a little bit later. But right now, I'm currently the research manager for the Cognitive Neuroscience of Thought Laboratory at the University of British Columbia, which has been super, super fun and cool. And I've been doing it for the last 2 years. And I've been working on a couple of different projects that I've used AI in a number of ways. Um, and I will start my master's degree in psychology in September, where I will be looking at how creative thought and the brain regions involved in creativity change when you're on ADHD medication. And why am I talking to you? It's basically just because throughout my academics, I've used artificial intelligence in a number of ways to help my research and ask really interesting questions. But first, what is AI? So artificial intelligence, as I'm sure you might have already learned, is the technology that allows computers to think and learn like humans. And you can train it to do different tasks that involve recognizing pictures or understanding speech and making different decisions. And there's lots of applications of AI that we see every day that we may not realize. So virtual assistants like Siri or Alexa are all examples of AI in use. Also, like the recommendation systems for like Netflix or TikTok or Instagram or all those sorts of things that basically look at how you're viewing different TikToks or videos and recommends new ones for you that you might like based on that information. Is another application that we see every day that we're totally used to, and something that we might not quite be used to yet. But the idea of like self-driving cars is also another application of AI that we see today. And there's different kinds of AI. So narrow AI, or also known as weak AI, is AI that's designed to do a specific task or a couple specific tasks, such as image recognition or language translation. But it isn't able to do, like every task that you give it. Um, uh, Another type is general AI or strong AI that has like really human-like cognitive abilities and capable of understanding and learning new tasks like a human can. And we don't really have any current examples of general AI or strong AI. This is more of like a theoretical, like in the future, we might be able to have programs that are able to do this. But one program that I have recently gotten into is from a book called Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. And this is a spaceship that one of the characters gets to use that has built-in AI that helps it do like special spy missions and stuff. But also its main interest is just collecting mushrooms. So it's a really interesting story, and I highly recommend it for anyone who is maybe interested in sci-fi or AI in general and how it can be used in more of like a fantasy or fictional universe. But this is, yeah, a series that I've been really enjoying lately. But how I use AI in my research is I use it to listen is one of the main ways I use it. So I use a program called Whisper AI that turns spoken words into written text. And how it works is basically through deep learning models, particularly transformers. It understands the words that are being said and processes these audio signals into written text. So this is a pre-trained AI program, which means that it was already trained on a bunch of different audio and generating a bunch of different text, including multiple different languages. So I didn't have to train the AI, or I didn't have to teach it how to do its job. It already knew how to do it. But how it does it a little bit more in depth is it uses these deep learning modules, which are basically a bunch of different connections that are called neural networks inspired by the human brain, and the connections that exist between different areas of the brain that consist of multiple layers of processing that take in data and feed it into a layer, and then out of that layer into another layer, and then through passing these through all of these different layers, it's able to recognize patterns from it. And in my research, I use it to look at audio files that I've collected from participants when they are on and off cannabis. They do a task called the Think Aloud paradigm, in which I just ask them to talk aloud whatever comes to mind for 12 minutes. And it takes this audio, I feed it into a code that we've written that houses the program and tells it where to write these files. And it goes into Whisper AI. It goes through these different neural networks that it's developed and created, and out comes the text file that I am able to use for further analyses in my project. But yeah, it's basically a huge time saver for me. But above being able to listen, it also helps me analyze my data. So I use a different AI program called BERT, or Bidirectional Encoder Representations from Transformers, that I use to understand meaning of words in sentences, basically. And so how it does it is a similar fashion to how Whisper AI generates the transcripts, but it also uses neural networks to look at the words before and after a certain word to understand a given word in context. And what really separates this from other large language models is its ability to incorporate context into its understanding of a word. So for example, Bert might be able to understand that in the sentence, the bank of a river is beautiful. Bert might know that bank in this meaning or in this use means the side of a river and not the place you keep your money, whereas other large language models would just have bank as one word, and it would incorporate like both the meanings, and it could give erroneous or incorrect information about the word because it has that dual meaning to it. But BERT basically separates these words out into two different words based on the context of how they're used. And it does this by generating embeddings. And so these embeddings for each word are essentially just different scores on a bunch of different scales. So you might have a scale of from how positive to negative the word is, how like emotional the word is, or how related to dogs it is. Basically, it has a whole bunch of different scales that it takes, and it has a bunch of different measures that it uses that we don't really understand. We don't really know. It does. One thing about BERT is it's not good at telling us everything it knows. It hides a lot of the information behind just its program. So we're not able to see exactly what these embeddings are, but what we can do is we can compare these vectors or these lines or points that BERT has scored each word on. So we can compare two different words to see how semantically similar or how similar the words are. So the word bank for the riverbank or the bank that you put money in would be close in terms of the words, but because of the context that they're used, they might not be as similar as you would expect. And so BERT generates these embeddings, and then we're able to generate a score of how similar words are based on the angle between two of the vectors or the scores of the scales to generate this similarity score. And how I use these scores is I have a task in which, in my cannabis study, in which participants look at a cue word, and then from that they respond a word or phrase, and then in 3 seconds they respond another word or phrase in response to the first word that they responded. And they do this on and on and on until they respond 10 words to each cue word. And so what I get out of it is basically a train of thought for each participant, for each cue word. And I want to see how the similarity between the first response that they give and the second response, or the eighth and ninth response, changes if they're on or off cannabis, as a way to look at how the mind jumps from topic to topic, and if that changes when we're on cannabis. Which is quite important to know, because although cannabis has been legalized for a number of years in Canada, it hasn't been really investigated for how it changes the way that we think, which is, the way we think is kind of how we are as people and how we act, and, all of these things. And so it's really important to know how cannabis might be impacting that. So those are the two projects that AI has helped me with while I've been at my current position at UBC. But previous to this, I actually used AI in my undergrad to try and help diagnose strokes. So basically, what I did is I collected a bunch of different information from electroencephalography, which is also known as EEG. And basically, what it does is it records the electrical signals from your brain. So we have just like a mobile, like little headband that goes around your ears and sits across your forehead. That basically, when you're using your brain, the way that it works is you have axons or parts of the neuron that generate electrical impulses by moving in and out, so basically sodium and potassium in and out of this axon channel. And when you do that, you generate electrical impulses from one end of the neuron to the next, and you're able to stimulate the next neuron in the chain. And when you're doing this, we can use EEG or electroencephalography to measure whatever is going on in that electrical activity on like the surface or the cortex of the brain. And so I get a lot of different information, as well as I get gyroscopic information from this mobile EEG system, which means how the head is tilting and how much it's moving, the velocity in which it's moving and the direction that it's moving. And we feed all of that, as well as characteristics like age and sex, into this random forest classifier, in order to ask it to try and figure out the best possible way to use all of this data to diagnose somebody with the correct type of stroke. So in stroke, there is essentially two different types of strokes. So there's ischemic stroke, which basically happens when you have a blocked blood vessel. So a region of the brain isn't able to get the blood that it needs to be able to function. Or you have a hemorrhagic stroke, which means that you have like a rip in your blood vessel, or it's broken in some way and you're actually bleeding into your brain or into the area around your brain. And in these strokes, ischemic stroke is quite easy to treat generally if you are able to diagnose it fast enough, right? We can just give you a blood thinner to break up the blood clot that generally is what's blocking the blood vessel. And when we give you a blood thinner, it'll thin your blood, then your blood will continue to flow back into this region, and you can decrease the impact of the stroke based on getting blood flow back to the region. But if you were to give someone with a hemorrhagic stroke, which is like bleeding into the brain, a blood thinner, it would make it much, much worse, and it would make it much harder to stop and much harder to treat and make better. So it's really important that we know quite quickly what kind of stroke a person is having. And the issue with stroke is they present, regardless of whether you're having an ischemic stroke or a hemorrhagic stroke, quite similarly. So we used random forest classifiers, which is a different type of AI than I had previously talked about, to generate these decision trees and try and classify a person as having an ischemic stroke or a hemorrhagic stroke. And so basically what random forest classifiers does is it generates a whole bunch of different decision trees. And you can set the number of decision trees. I think we used like 1,000 different potential trees that it generates. And then it looks at all of these different trees and tries to find the best solution, but that's most accurate based on a training data set. So when I have all of my data that I use to train and generate this AI classifier, I took a subset of it and made it the training data set. And so I told the classifier what the right answer was. And then I gave the classifier a test data set in which I didn't tell it what the right answer was. And so once it had learned how to get the right answer from the training data set, I ran it through the test data set, and then it was able to look at, and then I told it eventually whether it was right or wrong. And it was able to choose out or decide which decision tree was the best at diagnosing somebody with these different kinds of strokes. And so what we were hoping for this to be used in is we were actually able to get it implemented for a little bit in the stroke ambulance that goes around rural Alberta, so out in the country away from the major cities. We have a special ambulance that is specific to picking up stroke victims. And what we wanted it to do is we wanted to have a program, and we got started on this, and it's continued to be worked on, is that we use this mobile EEG system, and you take a 3-minute recording. It pops out a diagnosis of whether it's an ischemic stroke or hemorrhagic stroke, so you can give blood thinners or not. And then it also, we're hoping to build into a part that it'll help decide with the paramedics which hospital they should be taken to for treatment, balancing the need for speed. So whether they should just be taken to like a local hospital, or whether they need to be going to like the University of Alberta Hospital, which is a stroke center and specializes in the treatment of stroke. So yeah, it was able to be used that way, and it's still ongoing, which was really exciting for my undergrad. And very, very interesting. It's what got me into research and into coding and AI. So I'm very thankful for that. So just to reiterate real quickly, how AI helps me in my research, I use Whisper AI to generate transcripts for me, saving me countless hours, because essentially each participant has 12 minutes of sober data and 12 minutes of data when they're on cannabis. And so if I were to have to type all of this out all by myself, it would take me around at least 150 hours to just listen one time to all of the different audio files from the different participants, because we're hoping to have about 300 participants in the study. So it saves me a ton of time, and I just have to go over and I can listen to the audio on 2 times speed and just double check that it got everything correctly. So it really, really saves me a ton of hours, and allows me to work on other projects, including when I use BERT, which calculates semantic similarity for me, and allows me to really ask questions that I wouldn't really be able to get at otherwise. I guess I could do a similar thing where I was asking multiple people how similar they thought 2 words were, but because of the amount of data that we're collecting, again, it would take a ton of time and a lot of energy, and you have to pay people for their work. So I would have to spend a lot of money asking people to rate how similar 2 words would be. But instead, BERT does this all super quick. It does it in less than 10 minutes for all of our data, and calculates all of the semantic similarity for me and allows me to ask some really interesting questions about how thoughts transition over time. And finally, I used random forest classifiers to generate the decision trees to help diagnose and direct stroke patients to the correct hospital for treatment. And I guess my takeaway from what I've been talking to you about is that AI has huge benefits as a tool to help speed up processes. But I also used it to structure my presentation. I used ChatGPT. I fed in it a lot of information about how I've been using the AI programs I've been generating, and the other things I wanted to talk about. And then it broke it down into different slides for me and made it super easy to get everything down on a page. And that's all in well, but it's important that we're not using AI to do other people's jobs or your own job, because it's simply unethical, right? There has recently been a study that I linked at the bottom of this slide about how there's been an increase of about like 1% of all of the published papers in the last year have been using AI to write a substantial portion of the scientific papers that are being published. And I think this is really unethical to do. It's one thing to do it for, a presentation that you're writing and you know all the information, but it's another to do it for something that's going to contribute to the larger society as a whole. And one of the issues with AI is it doesn't have like the ethical decision-making skills built into it that humans do, right? We know when lying is correct, or when it's good to lie about something, like a little white lie or whatnot, or when it's bad. And most of the time it is bad to lie about something, but AI simply doesn't know this. And sometimes it feeds you false information. And if you're not really careful, you can incorporate this into the work that you're doing. So it's really important that if you're working with AI, that you watch over it carefully and double check to make sure that it's doing things correctly. But like I said, I think it does have huge benefits when used in the correct way. Uh, yeah, so that's everything from me. So thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions or concerns, I would be happy to hear from you. If you want to just shoot me an email, or if you want to chat about how thoughts change over time or on different substances, I'd be happy to chat about that. So yeah, thank you so much.